Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back for the Week 5 edition of the RosterWatch.com TradeCast. My name is Byron Lambert, and of course, it's a pleasure to join you again. We meet here every week of the season to break down the fantasy football trade market. We talk general strategy. We discuss some of the popular trade targets for the week, and of course, I always leave you guys with some mock trade examples at the end of the broadcast so that you have some ideas of deals that you can attempt to configure in your league. And look, the trick to this entire process is valuing the players, and then we have to be vigilant and we have to be opportunistic. I mean, I want you guys to remember that word, to be opportunistic. We're here to be opportunists. That's how we're going to capitalize, when others aren't paying attention. That's where we're going to find the inefficiencies that exist in our league on the trade market, and we're going to work those, and we're going to improve our team every week of the season. It's kind of the missing link that so many folks really don't do. Everybody, of course, works their waiver wire, but there's just not enough people working their trade markets in their leagues, and there's certainly not enough people optimizing, their strategy when doing so. And just to show you guys that I practice what I preach, last week on this podcast we discussed Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens as a buy low tight end option. So wanted to give you guys a little anecdote. I was in the ropes in one of my most important leagues last week, and I made a trade for Mark Andrews. I did exactly what we discuss every week of the season here. I assembled a consolidation trade, and that's where I wanted to take two of my good players and package them together and trade up for one player that I view as better in return, a guy that I viewed was somebody that would help my starting lineup in general be more competitive, but also had a tremendous matchup, last week. So what I did was exactly what I tell you guys to do. I went through the trade targets discussed on this show. I went and looked all those guys up in my own league, and I also tell you every week of the season that we are wanting to take advantage of the losing teams in our league. So just so happened that it was a kind of a middling team that rostered Mark Andrews that had some holes in his roster because of injury. And so I very quickly identified, this is a perfect opportunity. This guy has to be totally disenfranchised with Mark Andrews. It was a slow start to the season. He had the horrible drops in the primetime game in the end zone. And so you just knew, it's what we talked about here last week. You knew that owners had to be frustrated with Mark Andrews. So again, I was opportunistic. I saw that we valued the player. We identified the player. It was Mark Andrews. I identified a need on my team was that I wanted to strengthen my tight end position, and I was in a must-win situation. I needed to trade for guys, somebody that had an excellent matchup last week because it was imperative that I got the win. And I identified that the other team who rostered Mark Andrews was a team that was struggling and had some holes to fill in a starting lineup in order to be more competitive. So I happen to be very deep at wide receiver in that league. We got the news that Deebo Samuel was returning to practice and was likely going to be active for his Week 4 matchup. So when that good bit of news came in, I took that as an opportunity, to create some leverage. That's the kind of news that creates some appeal and makes your player marketable. So I took Deebo Samuel, who most people view as going to be, a very flex-worthy or even, starter-worthy fantasy wide receiver moving forward. And, of course, this is to a player in my league who doesn't know as much about Brandon Ayuk as we do and our listeners do, and all of the sharps do that are members of RosterWatch Nation. So, this individual is excited about possibly getting a Deebo Samuel. And then, as I always indicate to you guys, the best way to trade for a tight end or a quarterback is take your current tight end, take your current quarterback, package them with another starter, a flex-worthy starter, and make the move to consolidate and level up. So I had Hayden Hurst, who is a tight end I like. I think he's plenty good on the season. But for me, I was willing to take the risk based on what we'd seen out of Hayden Hurst and what we know about Mark Andrews to go ahead and just take Hayden Hurst, take Deebo Samuel, package them together, ship him out. I got Mark Andrews in return, who had the excellent matchup. And, I had the wide receiver depth to do it. I still got 4 other great wide receivers. So it was really no loss to me. And, looking back, Mark Andrews won the week for me. He might have saved my season last week. So that was a critical trade. That's the way that you guys need to be thinking. I was a struggling team who happened to have a lot of good assets. I was struggling just more because of injuries and slow starts. So I actually was a rare circumstance of a struggling team that had the resources to put together, construct a consolidation trade, and do something like that. But oftentimes, like we talk about, it'll be the winning teams that are really able to pillage the losing teams in their league for these kind of deals. So, look, I looked at it and I said Hayden Hurst will be a starter for him. And if you look at his profile on the surface, it's been really better than Mark Andrews on the season. People are excited about attaching themselves to the Falcons offense. And, again, I explained, why I thought Deebo Samuel would be marketable. So look, I gave up 2 players, and oftentimes you've got to kind of, in some ways, quote unquote, in terms of total player equity, quote unquote, overpay for the guy that you're leveling up to consolidate. I mean, somebody's not just going to give away Mark Andrews in a year where tight end is, so thin. But look, I identified my needs. I wanted to make a meaningful trade. I had I had a strategy in mind. I had a goal in mind, and then I took time to assess the other partner, the other party's needs. And I just said, okay, this makes sense, because if you don't want to waste your time, if you want to have a higher success rate, it's really important to try to craft deals that make sense for the other party too, so that, of course, they'll be enticed. So, and as an example of, of what I do in my own leagues, to show you guys that I practice what I preach, I thought it would be good to give that anecdote at the beginning of this episode. It was a meaningful trade, and it could be a season changer. And as we talk about, your number one mandate of the season should be to make as many of these consolidation trades as possible. Why? Because when I made that trade, yes, I gave up more, quote unquote, total player equity in order to get Andrews by giving up Deebo Samuel and Hayden Hurst. But that doesn't take into account the roster spot that I liberated, and I'm going to be able to backfill with another very important waiver wire claim over the course of the next week or two. And then once you add that waiver claim to the mix, and you start to groom and develop that player at the bottom of your roster, all of a sudden that player's equity grows. Then you say, okay, Mark Andrews plus replacement player X. Now their total equity all of a sudden is more than the Hayden Hurst and the Deebo Samuel that I gave up in the first place. So this is the arbitrage. It's the nexus of the trade market and of the waiver wire in your league. And this is how we're going to constantly, slowly but surely, kind of level our roster up at every turn from the top to the bottom. And over the course of the season, we'll increase the player equity across the top of our roster, which means that we're going to be stacked with lush assets, from top to bottom, from our starting roster, our starting lineup, all the way to our benches. And the reason that we want to do this is for twofold. Number one, to navigate the attrition of the season, which I think you guys are clearly seeing is probably more important than ever this year, with the way that injuries, not only injuries, I mean, all these COVID positive tests and these teams missing games. I mean, you've got to have some depth on your bench, and you're going to need it if you want to be successful this year, unless you expect to run the table by getting super lucky, which obviously is not, a favorable strategy to depend on. So the other thing then we'll be doing is, once we've stacked up our team with just, a wealth of fantasy assets from top to bottom, bench and starting lineup, then later in the season, we'll go into detail how we're going to leverage that into the best playoff roster that you guys have ever seen. You'll want to stick around for that as the season progresses. But in the meantime, let's continue on here with what we're doing in this phase of the season, which is basically twofold. If we are operating from a position of strength, meaning we're either have a terrific record or we have a ton of assets, we are pursuing the consolidation trade because we're out hunting. We're out game hunting. we're buying if we're in that position. We're trying to take two of our good players or two of our middling players that are overperforming and are marketable at the moment. We're trying to package them up, consolidate them, ship them off to another team who's likely struggling, and maybe roster some players that we think we can buy low on, and we are going to consolidate those middling players into one player that we view as superior in return. And that's what we're the number one mandate of this point in the season. But if we're a struggling team, the other kind of trade that we'll be participating in right now is if we're struggling and we've identified the reason that we're struggling is because we have holes in our starting lineup, and that's keeping us from being competitive every single week, then we need to consider taking the best player on our roster, especially if they're sell high at the moment or a marketable name, and we need to consider liquidating them down into get somebody to quote unquote overpay you for them, like I discussed earlier with the Mark Andrews trade, because that's basically what's going to happen, and you get two guys that in return that can become starters for you that have great matchups that can help you win now, and that's a sensible way to do that, to go about that. And then I guess just so we can give you something new on this episode, we'll give you a third type of trade that's out there. We talk often about consolidation trades and liquidation trades. They're the two most common and frequent configurations. But I'll call it the roster balancing trade. As we see a lot of these come across the message board at RosterWatch.com, and this is the 1-for-1 interpositional trade. So this is when somebody says, should I trade running back X for wide receiver Y? Well, obviously, if you think you're ripping somebody off and you're just getting, what's clearly the best player in return in the deal, then yeah, of course you want to do that deal as long as it's not going to leave you ultra short at whatever position that you're trading off. But clearly that's unlikely to be the circumstance, that you're just ripping somebody off in that situation. So more than likely, the reason you're doing this is because you've identified that you need to balance your roster. Maybe you're really deep at wide receiver but short at running back. And maybe there's another team in your league who's deep at running back but short at wide receiver. You could trade, players from different positions of, equivalent value. And that can be a win-win for everybody, because that can help you balance your roster, which, in theory would make your starting lineup more competitive every week, which is what we need because we've always got to maintain a focus on winning now. Another tactic this time of year is that the bye weeks are beginning in principle, or have begun in principle here, and oftentimes bye weeks can represent an artificial moment to buy on a player in your league, on possibly a good player, maybe a guy who wouldn't be a buy low or wouldn't even be a buy otherwise, but maybe if their owner's hard up and that player's entering into the buy, maybe it creates an opportunity to make some offers for that player, because maybe his owner, if he's in a tough situation, won't be able to withstand or absorb that buy and needs to win now and needs to make some moves. It's the Lions and the Packers that are going into the bye for Week 5, so you may want to just take a look and see if any of the marquee players from those teams are on, losing teams in your league, and see if there's see if there's a chance to be opportunistic there on a Lions or Packers marquee player in your league. That's the way that we need to be thinking. Of course, everybody, we always ask to please subscribe and to follow us at RosterWatch over at RosterWatch.com. Follow us on Twitter at RosterWatch. Please subscribe to us here on YouTube, the RosterWatch channel on YouTube. And let's go ahead and dive right in, because we got a lot of names to cover. We have a big trade market, a big fantasy football trade market right here on the RosterWatch.com TradeCast for Week 5. So let's get going, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's talk about the players that maybe we want to look to sell super high on in order to get an elite, a super premium player in return. I think this is a batch of sell high running backs that we can also consider liquidating if we have other holes that we need to fill. If we need two good starters in return to help complete our starting lineup, and make us more competitive. So this first group of running backs I want to talk about, it's only a sell super high, and these are assets that we would want to use to chase down the biggest names, the biggest fish in all of fantasy football. These are also guys we could consider liquidating if we're struggling and we need to get two really good players in return. But once again, this batch of running backs, they're not pure sells. They're only sell very highs. And, they may, in fact, even for some, just be flat out holds. But, of course, we're going to have to talk about them right here on the Week 5 TradeCast. And we're going to begin with Melvin Gordon of the Denver Broncos. It was an unexpected 25 points in Week 4. With a third-string quarterback at the helm. I think that was a pleasant surprise for all Melvin Gordon owners. On the back of 2 more touchdowns in Week 4, Melvin Gordon is 44% touchdown dependent in standard formats on the season, which is well above the mark of what represents reliable and sustainable fantasy production at current levels. Obviously, we have a Phillip Lindsay return that is seemingly imminent. We do have a Drew Lock return that's also seemingly imminent. I think that kind of helps everybody on the Broncos offense. But in the end, Melvin Gordon has basically been performing as like a low-end RB1, and at least recently. And the truth is, Gordon is probably on the season more of an RB2, which is exactly what we drafted him to be. I think he's an upside RB2. Again, probably exactly what we drafted him to be. And, Melvin Gordon gets a tough matchup this week that I think it's going to require that he finds the end zone. But if he's able to get through this week with any success, I think Melvin Gordon owners will be looking forward to Week 6 and Week 7, because those are 2 home matchups with Miami and Kansas City. And again, Drew Lock will hopefully be back by then. So, those are good things that bode well for Gordon, too. So, it's a reminder that Gordon is not a pure sell. He's only a sell high, a sell very high, coming off the 25 point game in Week 4. And again, you got to think to yourself, well, who am I going to sell Melvin Gordon high for? You don't want to sell Melvin Gordon to make a marginal move. You need to make meaningful trades that align with your needs as a team. And, I would think of the top 3, 4, 5 names in all of fantasy football, and that's who I would be targeting if I was going to use Melvin Gordon in order to consolidate and level up for one of the apex predators, one of the super premium players, one of the biggest names in all of fantasy football. Of course, as I mentioned later in this episode, we'll give you some options as to guys that you might consider targeting if you're a Melvin Gordon owner. And then on the other hand, if you're a Melvin Gordon owner and you're losing, and once again, you need to liquidate him as you've identified you've got holes in your starting lineup, trade Melvin Gordon for 2 starters, preferably 2 starters you think are buy lows at the moment. Maybe guys from this podcast that we talk about that are buy lows. Target 2 of those guys. Target 2 of those dudes and help complete your starting lineup, become more competitive, and try to win now, because ultimately that's what this game is all about. Let's stick with this group of running backs that are sell super duper high. Certainly not must sells, but guys that I think we can use to go after the biggest fish in all of fantasy football right now. Guys that I think if we're struggling with our starting lineup, we can use to liquidate at this moment in order to become more competitive and bring a couple of really good players to our roster. So, of course, we're getting a ton of questions this week about Joe Mixon, a player we've spoken about for the last 2 weeks on this TradeCast. And, just remember, it's always been part of the plan to get the big Joe Mixon rebound game in Week 4 and then to reassess and to make some decisions. Now, fortunately, at this point in the season, we've got some more data. And so, we have a little bit different views than maybe we had a few weeks ago. But I think it's very, very important to remember that things oftentimes come full circle, and that you need to be aware that we were predicting this Joe Mixon, breakout. So to me, it's easy to get fooled by what was predictably, a huge performance, obviously bigger than anybody ever expected, and something that gets you very, very excited. But you don't want to fall victim to getting too excited about basically something that you predicted. Like, we knew this was going to be a nut spot for Joe Mixon. We didn't know it was going to be that good. The fact that it was that good makes us even more confident. But I just think it's so easy to have recency bias is what we're talking about. So you don't want that to totally disrupt the sound, clear-minded views you had going into week 4. That said, things have changed, and we're going to deal with the situation that we have at hand now. This is what's happened in the past really doesn't matter, because, like I said, we don't want to get fooled by a predictably explosive Joe Mixon week 4 performance, but we don't want to be the fools either. So I just, again, be careful not to get caught up in the excitement of the moment. Remember that we've always had a plan in mind with Joe Mixon. And, to me, the 6 targets were absolutely the most important metric, the most important part of Joe Mixon's week 4 effort against Jacksonville. Those targets are what Mixon's value are going to be very contingent upon all season. We were extremely disappointed. It was unforgivable, the low target volume that a good receiver like Joe Mixon got in the first 3 weeks of the season. It's just, in this situation, number one, that was what was baked into Joe Mixon's preseason value. But number two, on a team that's going to be up and down in a tough division with a lot of tough matchups with a rookie quarterback and a bad offensive line, you're just, from a fantasy perspective, you're going to need the targets for Mixon to retain the value that you hope for. So that was really, really promising, and was my biggest takeaway from Joe Mixon's week 4 performance. Not even the 40 points and the 3 touchdowns. It was the 6 targets. I do think Joe Burrow's proficiency is going to somewhat be able to mitigate the inefficiency and the poor quality of the offensive line in Cincinnati. What I mean by that is Joe Burrow is going to put Joe Mixon in scoring opportunities, is basically what's going to happen. He's able to run a competent offense because he's such a good young quarterback. Despite a bad offensive line, it's not ideal, but it is a mitigating factor there in Cincinnati. The line is still a concern, but we should keep in mind that as we look ahead, I think it's fair to say that Joe Burrow provides some counterbalance to that. Also, the other thing that has really eased up, as far as we look at the big picture on the season, is the schedule. As more data, more inputs have come in, and we've gotten updated matchup ratings on the remainder of the teams that Joe Mixon, faces this year. That looks a lot better. I mean, it's still not great, but the schedule has eased up kind of on the long run, on the big picture for Joe Mixon. That makes you feel a little bit better. However, the next 2 matchups are quite difficult for Cincinnati on the road at Baltimore and Indianapolis in week 5 and 6. Those are tough games on the matchup tool for Joe Mixon. Then they get a bit of a respite with 2 solid home games in week 7 and week 8. And then it's the week 9 bye for Joe Mixon, and another tough matchup then coming out of the week 9 bye at Pittsburgh in week 10. So I think when you kind of distill all of that, in a way you could say that basically 4 of the next 6 weeks could be tricky to pretty tricky for Joe Mixon, especially including the next 2 on the road at Baltimore and Indianapolis. And I think it could be, it's like you're on a sugar high with Joe Mixon right now. So that could be like a big, big letdown the next couple of weeks if you let your expectations kind of spiral out of control here. And, I just think that all these things are to be mindful of when it comes to Joe Mixon, which to me makes... He's not an untouchable on our rosters. He's a good player you feel a lot better about. He was your first-round pick. With all the other injuries at running back, I think his value only, goes up to his owners. But he's not an untouchable given the situation he's in. He's certainly not a must-sell. So, again, I think Mixon is a guy that we really only want to sell super high on, to try to consolidate and level up for one of the most elite players in fantasy football, because I'm not sold that that's what we've got in Joe Mixon at this point, and I do not I don't want to react to the one performance. I think we have a fair assessment right here of Mixon as a good hold, but a guy with his name and that kind of big game in the rearview mirror in week 4 and a tough schedule ahead, that if you can parlay him into one of the biggest fish that you find to be more reliable on the season, I think it'd be a good idea to at least attempt to do so. I own Mixon and will attempt to be doing so in my own league this week, and we'll give you the names of some of those guys you might want to chase down with Joe Mixon a little bit later in the show. Or again, like we discussed with Gordon, Joe Mixon could be actually, I think Joe Mixon is probably the ideal guy. If you're a losing team, which you probably are because you're a Mixon owner, if you're a losing team and you have holes in your roster, if you're not only losing because Mixon got off to a slow start, but maybe you're losing because you've got holes in your starting lineup, I think Joe Mixon is the ideal guy. He's an outstanding candidate to attempt to liquidate for 2 very high-quality assets in return that'll be starters on your team with good matchups that can help you win right now. So if you've identified that your biggest need right now is fielding a more competitive starting lineup to get back in the win column, and you need a few guys to do it, if you're a Joe Mixon owner, I think he'll be a great solution for you, and I would absolutely recommend that you look and see what kind of deal you could do of that nature in your league. I think there's a decent chance that somebody will quote-unquote overpay you for Joe Mixon. And, last but not least in this category of kind of quasi-elite, big-name running backs coming off good performances that I think you can take this opportunity to sell a little bit high on them and try to see if you can net yourself a really big fish. Last but not least, we talked about Gordon. We talked about Mixon. I'd add Todd Gurley to that. Now, Todd Gurley was a guy that we bought low on 2 weeks ago on this show. It's paid off in spades. He still has a fantastic schedule ahead. So we're in no rush to sell Todd Gurley. But if you look at his profile, the touches per game, all the concerns surrounding him, what's going on with the Falcons, to me right now, his game log looks very, very good. If you look at his fantasy points scored, it all looks very, very good. Todd Gurley is a very marketable asset, I believe, at this point. So I'm happy to keep him because I think he's got some good games in store that can really help us win this next month. But Todd Gurley, also a guy, I think there's enough question marks about him, and I think his marketability is at a high point right now that if I can use Todd Gurley to pursue one of the highest and best assets, one of the biggest names in all of fantasy football, somebody that I view as better, with more upside and more reliable than Todd Gurley on the season, I absolutely would take my chances doing it. All right, let's get to some running backs that I think you can maybe have a little bit of a lesser ilk than, not the Melvin Gordons, not the Joe Mixons, not the Todd Gurleys, maybe a notch or two down running backs that I think you should also, I might not necessarily be able to go after the biggest names in fantasy football and all of fantasy football with these guys, but I think they're players you can still use right now to try to track down an elite guy in a consolidation trade. I don't know that either one of these players will retain enough value to be a candidate to liquidate if you're struggling, but I think they're 2 very ideal consolidation trade pieces. So let me just dive into them right now. Yeah, let's see here. We're going to take Melvin Gordon down, and voila. We're going to put Devin Singletary up for the Week 5 trade cast. A sell high for an elite player. Devin Singletary. I'll give you guys the rundown here. 40 touches over the last 2 weeks. In some ways, Devin Singletary could even have more upside in this offense because he's only a 15% touchdown-dependent player on the season, which means he really hasn't gotten the end zone much yet. And that's on an 89% snap count in the last 2 weeks, which is like an eye-popping snap count. And the fact is, Devin Singletary's capitalized on his opportunity. He's looked awesome. So we're not really totally itching to sell because we like being attached to this offense in Buffalo, which is entertaining and on fire. And we always remember, again, in some ways things kind of come full circle because before the Bills drafted Zach Moss, Devin Singletary was one of my, big breakout, year two guys that I had all of my sights set on, and Zach Moss coming in kind of changed that. So, I don't think that we totally want to. I don't think we want to lose sight of the fact that Devin Singletary still has quite a bit of upside in this particular situation, and he has a pretty good schedule for the next 6 weeks, including a really nice stretch for the next 3 weeks. And of course, we're always talking about winning now on the RosterWatch.com TradeCast, and how we can do that through the trade market, how we can do that through waiver wires in our leagues. And the other thing I'm seeing with Singletary here is the 2 tougher matchups that he gets in this upcoming 6-week span. Those occur at home. So Singletary, a really, really pleasant and favorable schedule for the next 6 weeks. But I think if we take Buffalo at face value and we look at their intentions for what they were intending to do at the outset of the season, in week 1 and week 2 before Zach Moss got hurt, what we saw was Zach Moss was a 10 touch per game, 45% snap count guy, which is that's a very common type of player in this league. A very common 2A type player in this league gets that 10, 12 touches a game, that 35 to 50% snap count, and Moss was right in the pocket for that. Now, Singletary has performed so well that maybe he's put this thing on lockdown, but I do think we have to be careful that Buffalo has kind of shown their hand here, and we need to be willing to deal in reality. And I think we know that they're going to want to get Zach Moss involved, and I think we know about how much they're going to want to get him involved. Now, that said, at a 45% snap count, 10 touch a game, Zach Moss, I think that still leaves plenty of meat on the bone for Devin Singletary to still be a really nice flex. But after the way he's played and the way his team looks, he's getting over 5 targets per game. I suppose it's possible that Singletary could still offer kind of low-end RB1 production on the season if everything just goes just right. So to me, if you kind of reconcile all of that probably leaves Devin Singletary as a middling RB2, which is still a plenty nice player and better than what you expected by the time you drafted him, because his ADP really fell like a rock through draft season. So if you got an RB2 out of Singletary, that was definitely better than you were probably expecting. So I think that's his value the rest of the season. His touchdown dependency, I said it was 15%. It could indicate Singletary's got more upside, but for a player of Singletary's profile we've seen in the past, it can also indicate he just doesn't necessarily have the propensity to score in that particular offense. So Devin Singletary, a good keep on a very hot offense, but I think based on everything we know, he's always the type of asset you should be willing to leverage for a better player when the right opportunity strikes. And I think this really could be the case with Singletary, especially before Zach Moss totally reintegrates. That said, if you got to keep him, and if you have realistic expectations and you're being honest with yourself, you have a really nice player in Singletary, probably in your flex, maybe your RB2 here over the next 6 weeks. But again, if I'm a Singletary owner, I think this is a great time to try to be opportunistic and see if I can package Singletary and another player and move up for a bigger name in fantasy football. And then, of course, a golden son of RosterWatch Nation, one of our favorites, one of yours truly's favorites. I mean, I think I'm the original Antonio Gibson loyalist, absolutist. I discovered him at the Senior Bowl really before anybody this year. Told you he looked like a Joe Mixon or a David Johnson out there. And, man, people are excited about Gibson right now. He's looking great. Antonio Gibson, the rookie running back in Washington, a player they were comfortable enough with to cut Adrian Peterson, who looks still very spry now in Detroit and was by all accounts having a good training camp. So I think it tells you what they thought about Gibson in camp, and I think everything is going totally accordingly. Gibson looks great. He's an ascending young player that's quickly trending in the right direction right now. And look, people are hyped about Antonio Gibson right now. I'm seeing it on the message boards at RosterWatch. I'm seeing it on Twitter. And they're so hyped that even the Chicken Littles that are super late to the party on Antonio Gibson are finally starting to come out because they're becoming comfortable enough with this player that otherwise they had no idea who the hell he was just a month ago. And as we know, Chicken Littles, they live in a state of irrational, fear. And if they don't know somebody, if they haven't heard about somebody, if they don't see that the stock value is already going up, they're not interested. These are the people that never make really very much money in life, because usually they're kind of a step or two behind. So 17 touches was Gibson's most touches of the season in a tough matchup on the road last week at Baltimore. I mean, as were his 20 fantasy points and his 5 targets. So these were all season highs: 17 touches, 20 fantasy points, 5 targets, and even his snap count was a season high for Antonio Gibson in week 4. However, it's still just a 44% snap count with a horrible quarterback situation in Washington. Kyle Allen has just been promoted. Dwayne Haskins has been benched. I mean, that said, I will mention that Kyle Allen was the quarterback in Carolina last year when Christian McCaffrey went bananas, and Scott Turner, the offensive coordinator, and Ron Rivera come from Carolina, and they've compared Gibson to a McCaffrey type. So who knows? Maybe Kyle Allen will favor him and continue to feed him more targets, because we've been seeing those tick up every week. But I don't think it would be honest to say that the quarterback situation in Washington is anything other than terrible. The next 3 matchups for Antonio Gibson, the Rams, the Giants, and the Cowboys, are all very solid matchups. He's got a bye in week 8. 2 of those next 3 matchups are at home. So again, we like Antonio Gibson. This is a good spot for Antonio Gibson. He's going to be a good player on the season. I personally drafted him in the 4th round of every one of my drafts. He was high on the cheat sheet, higher than all these turds: Mark Ingram, Leonard Fournette, all these guys that you guys are so happy that you own Gibson over at this point of the season. So, again, Antonio Gibson, not a sell, only a sell high, and only if you are pursuing one of the biggest names in all of fantasy football. I think Gibson looks like a very solid RB2 the rest of the season. But to be fair, I think unless we see his volume and his snap count continue to go way up, his upside just by default has to be limited in this Redskins offense. If I can use Antonio Gibson to level up in a trade deal for a true RB1 for maybe a top 5 to 7 wide receiver, I'm definitely looking into it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll keep moving along here on the running back front on the Week 5 fantasy football trade market right here on the RosterWatch.com TradeCast. I'm Byron Lambert, and I thank each and every one of you for all of your support at RosterWatch, and also for joining me here every week to break down all the moves that we want to make this week on the trade market. These are moves, I told you. I started the show out with my trade for Mark Andrews last week. I literally went on Thursday morning, woke up, looked at my notes from the TradeCast, and I went out and made offers on all those dudes. So I hope that you'll do the same. I promise you, if you can go out this year and make it more consolidation trades that you've ever made in the past, you'll thank me at the end of the season that you've built one of the best teams that you've ever put together in your fantasy football league. So let's get to another group of maybe a little bit lower level running backs now. I think these are guys that you always try to sell high on whenever you can. Whenever they sell high, whenever their value is up, you try to sell high on this batch of players now. And we've talked about Mark Ingram before, but we haven't talked about Jerick McKinnon before in this same little group of guys here. So I think Jerick McKinnon, he's the real deal this season. I mean, he's been excellent almost every week. Love the scheme. Love the Kyle Shanahan situation. I think he's like a real piece of this offense. And truly, I think you can probably, we'll see, but I think he's probably a flex the rest of the way. We got a couple of good matchups on the horizon here for Jerick McKinnon the next few weeks as well. They're at their couple of home games. So, again, certainly not a must-sell for Jerick McKinnon. But, look, with Raheem Mostert, close to a return, I would at least be thinking to myself, if I'm a McKinnon owner, what is the highest and best asset that I can parlay Jerick McKinnon into right now while his marketability is probably at if not a career high, I mean, the highest it's been in years at this point. Again, otherwise, I think it's about expectations and what your team needs are. I think he's a fine flex the rest of the season. But look, we're talking about Jerick McKinnon. We're talking about a running back by committee. We're talking about Kyle Shanahan, who, is very difficult to prognosticate the long-term viability of his running backs. I just think McKinnon is a good player. You're happy to keep. He's performed very admirably, but he's the perfect candidate, to use as an asset to try to go pursue a player that you feel more comfortable with, you think is going to be more reliable on the season, will make your team more competitive. The other running backs that I would put in this same bucket with Jerick McKinnon, Ronald Jones, he's got the Thursday night matchup, tough one at the Bears. He got 9 targets. He couldn't do anything with them last week. We saw Keyshawn Vaughn finally get involved. Sounds like Leonard Fournette probably doubtful. So just based on volume, just based on being attached to this Bucs offense, I mean, Jones is looks like a pretty good running back for them between the 20s. But he's not that good on in the receiving game, and he doesn't really he's not a hammer. So both of those reasons, the reasons that I don't think he's really going to ever be prolific around the red zone, which is really what you're hoping for attached to this offense. Now, no Leonard Fournette, obviously. I think that bodes well for Jones maybe finally getting in the end zone. But I think he's still a fine play if you need him this week. But I just say while his value is still, enticing to others in your league, if you don't absolutely have to have Ronald Jones this week for some reason, like take Ronald Jones, package him up, get him the hell off your roster so you don't have to worry about that headache the rest of the season. See if you can get up. This is what we're talking about. Even though Jones is a fine, you feel okay about him from last week. You feel kind of good about the volume you might get this week, but deep down, you don't feel comfortable with Ronald Jones the rest of the season. You're nervous about, are you going to be able to trust him? He doesn't feel reliable, later on. So get rid of that headache, improve your team, and use Ronald Jones to trade up for a better player in your league. I would also consider doing that with Mark Ingram. Talked about him a couple of weeks ago. Said anytime you can sell high on Mark Ingram, you ought to be out there trying your damnedest to do it. And you've got to, with him, you got to wait for him to get his value up. He's going to be so inconsistent. So these times, it's not every week you could trade Mark Ingram. So when that iron is hot, it's time to strike. And then Mike Davis, Carolina. Obviously, his viability is going to be short-lived with McCaffrey coming back. And I just think he's a guy that, historically, his production is going to be short-lived, period, just based on the type of player that he is. He can come in and have a lot of juice for 1-2 couple of games. But we've seen it. That guy, these average players, they run out of gas, man, after a few games. You can't expect it. So, I think Mike Davis has a great game log. His value looks good right now. If there's somebody in your league that's like a desperate losing team and needs starters right now, I think Mike Davis is a perfect guy to throw in, as that second player in a deal that somebody can start this week and feel good about, and it can help them get a win. Look, when you're the losing team, you don't have the leverage. You don't have all to say. This is the great thing about being the winning team or being in a position of strength, is that you can worry a little bit more about just collecting the best players. The losing teams have to worry, if they're being rational, about winning, this week. So if I had Mike Davis, if I had Mark Ingram, if I had Ronald Jones, if I had Jerick McKinnon, I would certainly be looking into selling all of those guys high this week to see if I could bring back a better, more reliable player that has better prospects on the rest of the season, in return. Now, I know this is what you guys are waiting for. We've talked about all these guys that we want to sell. It's a big week. So the good news is you'll have a lot of options this week of guys that you can deal with. I think this is going to be a very active trade market because there's a lot of guys with marketability. And there's also guys that we're interested in buying low on this week, maybe some big name guys. So here it is. Let's talk about Zeke Elliott. There he is, fumbling that football. against the Cleveland Browns this last week. And look, the game log is fine for Zeke Elliott. It's fine, but people feel a little bit down about him. I think because of the Cowboys. I think because of the fumbles. And the fact is Zeke's performed admirably, but there's a whole batch of running backs that are performing significantly better than Zeke at this moment. So, you're never going to buy low on Ezekiel Elliott, but as I always say, like, the fact that he's even potentially available is a major development in your league. I mean, the fact that he could even potentially be even in consideration, and I think he is this week, and he's the kind of super elite player they're always looking to obtain. So all these guys we just talked about, from Melvin Gordon to Joe Mixon to Todd Gurley, Devin Singletary, Antonio Gibson, the McKinnons of the world, how can you get some of these guys together and go after a player like Zeke Elliott in your league this week? It'd be a very, very shrewd move to make. I mean, you take your chances. You take your chances with guys like a roster full of guys like Zeke Elliott. And if it doesn't shake out, it wasn't meant to be. He's the type of guy that we're always looking to obtain. Remember, these super elite apex predators, the biggest fish in all of fantasy, and they don't get much bigger than Zeke Elliott in your fantasy football trade market. The other guy I'd kind of put up there with Zeke is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 70% snap count, 22 touches per game over the last 2 weeks. That's great volume. That's great activity. That's great participation rate. I mean, from my perspective, with Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey sideline, I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of the elite in all of fantasy football, not just only based on the situation, but because of his talent. But of course, you want to be attached to a Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid offense. I mean, the volume's there. Edwards-Helaire looks awesome. But the box score, the fantasy box score, the bottom line fantasy production hasn't been just totally eye-popping the last couple of weeks. So again, you're not going to buy low, much like Zeke, on Edwards-Helaire. But the fact that he's even available is really noteworthy in your league. And if you're in position to do it, like, you should try to go after Zeke. You should try to go after Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 3 top 6 matchups at home over the next 5 weeks before the Week 10 bye. So, like, this is going to be a really good stretch for Clyde as well, and I think he'd be well suited, to take a look at those guys and see if you can bring home one of those super big fish in your league. And of course, this is more than likely going to be if you're a winning team and you've got a bunch of assets on your roster that are performing well. Take 2 of those guys, package them up, go get yourself Zeke Elliott, go get yourself Clyde Edwards-Helaire. When we're talking about those guys as running back buy targets for Week 5, I think we can mention a couple of guys maybe just a notch below them. We'll call them quasi-elite players that I would certainly look in to what their situation is in my league. Because I think when both of these players start finding the end zone again, I mean, there's a good chance it's going to be wheels up all over. Josh Jacobs, Las Vegas Raiders. It's a middling to pretty tough schedule through Week 11 from now until then, including a Week 6 bye next week. So you kind of need to always look at the schedule, know what you're getting when you're making a trade for players. Look at the schedules for all the players involved. That's always important to see what's going on in the trade. I think Josh Jacobs is seemingly always a little bit injured, a little bit banged up. So we don't want to go bananas here. We've seen the declining snap count percentage for Jacobs the last couple of weeks, turning into more of a 65-70% snap count guy. Really not the 75+% snap count guy we were hoping for. Kind of like the super elite players at that position in the league. But we do love seeing 4.24 targets per game. That is encouraging for Josh Jacobs this year. And the fact is, on the season, he's second in the league at 24 touches per game. So big picture, he's been a volume hog to this point. The offense has been struggling a little lately with the wide receiver injuries. The Raiders are about to get a little healthier there. So I just think 24 touches a game, it's hard to ignore. I think I'd see if I could get a deal on Josh Jacobs from a struggling team in my league. He would make an awesome RB2, or if you're fortunate enough to make him a flex, like, that would be an awesome flex to add to your squad. And then the other guy would be Miles Sanders I think a couple of second-year running backs here. I mean, guys that are just historically in prime position to have big breakout. Miles Sanders, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles. Another guy I would target in trades this week. Like, I'm really interested in personally targeting Miles Sanders in my own leagues this week. The next 2 weeks are kind of tough, Pittsburgh and Baltimore. So if we can't get him now for the right price, this is a guy, we don't want to go crazy over because of those matchups the next 2 weeks. But I think we could have an opportunity. There could be a little window here on Miles Sanders for a week or two. But after Pittsburgh and Baltimore, I think the window will be shut because Sanders is going to get good matchups with the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys in the division before the Week 9 bye, so that'll be Week 7 and 8. 3 of his next 4 games are at home. I think that's all good for Miles Sanders. And we're expecting the Eagles' offense to begin getting a little healthier here pretty soon. So we love seeing 20 touches a game for a player like Miles Sanders. That's more than you could hope for. Like, that's for a guy of his profile. That's an excellent number that is very promising for Miles Sanders' prospects on the season. He's not been, like I said, him and Jacobs not been touchdown dependent. Really on the entirety of the season, especially Sanders has not been touchdown dependent on the season. I think he scored 1 time. For him, I definitely think that means there's a lot of potential positive regression in store because he's playing a 77% snap count, folks. Miles Sanders, that's a big snap count. That's a big time snap count for a player like that. Also getting the 6 targets a game, that's a massive number. So look, Miles Sanders continues to be a prime candidate for a breakout explosion in year 2. But more importantly, I think down the stretch this year, which isn't too dissimilar to what we saw with Miles Sanders last year. So if I can't get in on a Zeke, if I can't get in on a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think I'm really trying like hell to get in on a Miles Sanders. And, the difference in price tag for a Sanders over those other 2 guys, that he may in fact be the prime target of the week on the fantasy football running back market. All right, we'll keep moving along here, folks. It's a big episode of the Week 5 RosterWatch.com TradeCast. It's a huge trade market out there, and we're breaking it all down for you. So a couple more running backs here before we get over to the wide receiver position that you might consider buying low on in your league. We gave you a lot of sell high guys, so we want to have a fair amount of buy targets here. And let's just hop right into it. It was a tough week last week and a lot of reason to remain skeptical. But he made the list this week. He made the Week 5 TradeCast, and that's going to be David Montgomery, the running back of the Chicago Bears. He's got that backfield all to himself. This week, Thursday night, it's a tough matchup. It is at home. He gets the formidable Tampa Bay Buccaneers, defense here. But after Week 5, it's going to be a really solid schedule before the Week 11 bye for David Montgomery. He did, of course, leave a lot to be desired last week. I think we were expecting a lot more. It was a tough matchup. We all knew it was a tough matchup against Indianapolis, which I think is a cautionary tale in this also tough matchup at home against Tampa Bay this week. And, of course, we never trust Matt Nagy. But I think we could still find some hope in David Montgomery, just especially on the season. 85% snap count last week. That's a monster snap count number. You hear this percentages I've been throwing around on these other guys. 4.1 yards per carry. That's a good enough number that it gives me some hope for David Montgomery. And then, of course, Nick Foles' integration in the offense. It was a little bit rocky this last week in a tough matchup, but I continue to think that the Nick Foles reintegration or integration into this Bears offense really just is good for everybody. I think we even saw it with Allen Robinson this last week, as we predicted on the show really last week, is that Nick Foles is, if you get him for Allen Robinson, even in the face of a formidable schedule, I think it's kind of a mitigating factor. So we can just going to have to hope that bleeds over, I think, to Montgomery, because he has absolutely no legitimate competition in that Bears backfield. And, from actually watching the games, I think he looks pretty good. He looks pretty good, but the thing with Montgomery is he's a guy that needs volume, and we've known that ever since we began scouting him. So hopefully the 85% snap count will beget the increase in volume that we would expect in the post Tariq Cohen era with Dave Montgomery. He's got 3-down capability. He needs to be getting more involved. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. But to me, Dave Montgomery, if you can get him for cheap enough, now like he's a guy you should be able to get for pretty cheap right now, is a really awesome target. I mean, what a great flex he would be the rest of the season. Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis Colts, another name I see flying around a lot on the message boards at rosterwatch.com. He's clearly available on some trade markets, and he's a good enough talent in a good enough situation that if he's available in your league, you should have some eyes for Jonathan Taylor. You should at least have a nose for sniffing around on what his situation is in your league. Again, it's kind of a lower level deal. Maybe you have just a couple of like flex guys you want to trade. You're not ready. You're not in position to go after one of these big fish. Like it's just like using the waiver wire cheat sheet. You don't always have to go after the top guys, the highest priority. Sometimes you're better served, doing some lower level deals, going after for some guys that are going to be cheaper on the waiver wire that'll be more valuable in a couple of weeks. We can also do that on our trade market. Derrick Henry, I bring up his name just because of the coronavirus situation going on with the Titans. Much like we discussed at the outset of this program, in terms of bye weeks, creating sometimes an artificial bye moment on good players, even when they're, they haven't necessarily been underperforming greatly. I think this is akin to that. If somehow Derrick Henry and the Titans get screwed again this week because of COVID, I mean, he could have an owner who's in real trouble. So again, this is a time to potentially be opportunistic. If you're a winning team that can avoid to, eat another missed game out of Derrick Henry, you're not going to get him for cheap. But if you've got enough assets to do it, what a coup that would be to add Derrick Henry to your roster right now. I mean, that would just be like, that's the kind of guy that you'll get an injection, just a massive injection of performance to your roster here as the season progresses, and I think would be a total game changer. Now, how likely is he to be available? I'm not sure. You'll have to check around your league, and you'll certainly have to, I think with Henry, be very contingent upon whether the Titans have another COVID setback. Clearly, if he plays, he's probably not going to be on the table in your league just because his owner already had to kind of eat a little bit of shit last week with Derrick Henry. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, I think these are guys that we treat similar kind of to Christian McCaffrey, the discussion we've had the past few weeks. Really only guys that they're stashes that you only really want to trade for if you're undefeated and have so many assets that it's no skin off your back to put those guys at the bottom of your bench and to give up whatever it's going to take to get them in return. I think we need to consider that, even when we want to say it's similar to the Christian McCaffrey discussion, I mean, obviously to a lesser degree. I think especially Eckler, whose injury looked really bad, and is probably not quite on the same, maybe not quite on the same level as Chubb, even though Eckler was going bananas when Herbert came in. So I think those are luxury assets, luxury items on the trade market. Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler. We don't want to trade for injured players. I think, you're going to be in a better situation if you do want them wait a week or two. Let their owners absorb a couple of lost weeks. Let their owners struggle, maybe lose another game or two because they're down these guys. And, it'd be a better time to buy anyways once those guys have a little bit of recovery in the rearview mirror. So not an emergency to go after Chubb and Eckler now, but maybe guys we have on the radar if we're undefeated teams or, nearly undefeated teams with a lot of good players on our bench or on our roster. I think if there's a Nick Chubb or Austin Eckler owner in our league that gets into trouble over the course of the next couple of weeks, we could look to capitalize over there. All right, I know you guys are probably tired of hearing about all the running backs for the Week 5 fantasy football trade market. So let's shift gear over to some sell-high wide receivers, guys that, much like we started with the running backs today, guys that we want to use to go after an elite player in return. All wide receivers who had big-time Week 4 performances, but guys that I think still retain question marks as it relates to their value rest of the season and maybe just their general situations. Odell Beckham, an absolute monster at Dallas this last week, enough to get everybody super excited. Multi-touchdown game. Potentially going to be more involved with Nick Chubb out and maybe a burgeoning chemistry with Cleveland. But I think Cleveland has shown us what type of team they would prefer to be, which is a ground and pound team. And I think Odell looks like a fine keep and a fine player to own this year. But like if you can use Odell to go after, one of the really, really elite players in the league, I mean, that's the kind of thing that's prudent to at least contemplate right now. These are the things that winning players are considering. Like there's an opportunity here when other people are sleeping and not talking about this stuff. Like the smart players are saying, well, I'm going to try to make a little bit of hay out of this moment. DJ Chark, I think, would fall into that category. Had a nice game on paper, a touchdown-dependent game on paper. Still don't know how much. Look, and I think he makes a lot of difference to Jaguars' offense. I think he's a good player, and I think he's got a good season in store. That said, I don't think he's an elite player, and this represents a ripe opportunity to see if you could parlay DJ Chark into a player that you view as better for the rest of the season. And those guys are out there because Chark is a nice player, but he's not an elite player. He is a wide receiver 2. Probably a middling wide receiver 2. Adam Thielen, Minnesota Vikings. Good pick, good play, good hold on the season. But I do think, we're going to see Justin Jefferson maybe start to bite into that action a little bit. Thielen a little bit touchdown dependent. We still never totally trust being attached to a Kirk Cousins offense. I just think Thielen is a fine keep, but he's got a big enough name and enough production on the season. If you can use Adam Thielen and, in combination with another lesser player to level up to a more elite player, like that is the shrewd thing to do. Open up liberate that roster spot for a waiver ad, move up to a better player. And this is the building blocks one by one to build a big Taj Mahal of a team. Terry McLaurin, Devontae Parker, both guys. McLaurin is about to get Kyle Allen, an abomination of a quarterback situation. He seems to be the kind of player that can kind of produce no matter what. So McLaurin is a fine keep. If you remember, DJ Moore did well with Kyle Allen last year. In a lot of ways, McLaurin is a very similar type of player to DJ Moore, and clearly the focal point of that passing game in Washington. I just still think it's a bad enough team and a bad enough quarterback situation that, again, McLaurin is not a must-sell. He's fine to keep. But if you can use McLaurin, a player that many people are excited about, to level up for a better player, you would be doing yourself a favor. And then the same with Devontae Parker in Miami. I'm not sure. It's not Tua time yet. And, as we've seen with Justin Herbert, getting the rookie in might not be the worst for the number one wide receiver on the team. Parker, who maybe, could profile kind of like as a Keenan Allen over there. But, that's far from being determined. And there's a lot up in the air. So Devontae Parker, actually, it's been a tough start because of the nagging hamstring, but really his game log is pretty damn good on the season considering we got the breakout. I mean, he's still a good player, especially with Fitzpatrick, and he's a fine hold if you have him. I think he's a good guy to keep plugging along with. But again, there's question marks. Why live with those? Why not take Devontae Parker? Why not be strategic? Take Devontae Parker while his game log looks really good, before there's any tumult with a rookie quarterback. Ship him the hell out. Bring somebody back that you trust more that's going to make your roster just look a lot better on paper. And maybe some guys that you can contemplate doing that with would also be some of these buy low wide receiver targets of the week 5 trade market. Let's begin with Julio Jones. I mean, people are disgusted by the effort that they got out of Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley on Monday night. That ruined a lot of people's nights. It lost a lot of people their leagues this week. And, once again, Jones a year older and just continuous nagging injuries. And also Calvin Ridley, who I don't think I'm ready to argue he's the wide receiver one on that team yet, but based on production, you can make that argument. Is there plenty to go around? Are the Falcons going to be playing from behind? Is Matt Ryan going to throw for a bunch of yards? Yeah. So, of course, we still like Julio Jones. That's why we're talking about him here. But his owners are down on him right now. He's put him in a bad spot the last few weeks, and it's not necessarily looking fantastic for this week. So Julio Jones, one of the big names in all of fantasy football, one of the big fish, one of the elite guys out there. Still plenty of reason to like him. You're not going to get him for dirt cheap, but again, the fact that you can even buy Julio Jones, the fact that probably you can buy a little bit low on Julio Jones is a big development. This is where the winning teams, the teams operating from a position of strength and luxury, this is where they clean up. They start just stacking these dudes up left and right. The Julio Jones and the Clyde Edwards-Helaire's of the world, the Miles Sanders, and the next thing you know, it's just it's a cartoonish mega lineup, and that's what we're aiming for right here on the RosterWatch.com TradeCast every week of the season. I think you could look at DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think his owners are going to sell him real low, but he came off of a tougher game this last week. Maybe people are a little concerned about the Cardinals' offense. I think it's going to be hard to get any type of discount on Hopkins, but again, the fact that he maybe outside chance he's even available in your league, I think you want to take a look at it. Chris Godwin. I actually think Chris Godwin, the sneaky one here. His owners could be in real trouble. I'm a Chris Godwin owner. Luckily, I've kind of been able to absorb his situation, but God, 2 missed games already. Going to be another missed game this week. We got a bye coming up sooner than later. So his owners aren't thrilled. But if you look at it like Chris Godwin, the 2 games he's played, he was good, and he didn't even play the whole games. He was good. I've been to those training camps. Godwin is a beast. Brady looks good. That offense looks good. Like when Godwin gets in, he's going to be a really nice fantasy player. I just think out of sight, out of mind. He's hurting his owners right now. People are disgusted because they had to draft him so early, and I just think he's fallen out of the conversation as being any type of elite or even quasi-elite fantasy wide receiver. But the problem is that's just simply not true. He is. Based on talent, based on his situation, Chris Godwin can easily return the type of value you expected when you drafted him this season once he gets healthy. That's, I think, one of the sneaky targets. If you're a winning team and there's a losing Godwin team out there, God, they're not married to him anymore. And what a great player to slide over to your team that can be like, imagine if Chris Godwin is your flex or wide receiver 3. I mean, that's an absolute freaking monster. And I would highly instruct you guys to see if you're winning, if you're 4-0, 3-1, if you got a ton of assets, you can afford to give up what it takes to help the Chris Godwin owner, maybe with a couple of guys to help him win this week and next week. Like, go check out Chris Godwin in your league. Like, you're not going to have to pay for him like Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins, but truthfully, once he gets back in, he could put up similar production. Maybe a little bit notch or 2 below that is possible. Wide receiver trade targets. I think at this point we all know DJ Moore is a buy low. The conversation at this point is he even the wide receiver 1 on his team? Doesn't look like it at this point. Still seems like maybe rational minds could prevail. That Moore at some point would overtake Robbie Anderson. I've seen him at Jets camp. He's a good player. That was kind of a miscast in New York, and I think also unhappy. So I don't want to totally diminish or trivialize him, but it does feel like DJ Moore should at least, if he's not going to rise to become the 1 on the team, it seems like he would at least kind of rise up to become the 1B on this team, and I can only get better for DJ Moore. So we're not entirely sure what we're going to get. You don't want to go crazy, but I think it's a calculated risk to go in on DJ Moore, and you might be able to get him for so cheap at this point that it's, again, really not that risky for you to do. And if If you can add DJ Moore as a wide receiver 3 or a flex, I think that's a smart move. I think it's a smart move. We need the depth. We're going to need the depth to navigate the attrition of this season, ladies and gentlemen. And then A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. Again, we'll need to watch the COVID situation with him. And certainly his owners have been waiting forever to get him back. But if you've been an A.J. Brown owner, I mean, you've been in purgatory. And you might not be able to afford to wait much longer. So I think A.J. Brown is another guy, like if you're in a winning situation and you can afford the kind of luxury of putting A.J. Brown on your bench or at the bottom of your roster, give up a couple guys for him if his owner's in a tough situation. Look, Brown was a guy that was hyper efficient last year. We thought was overvalued during drafts. That said, like when he comes back, he's clearly going to be him and the Janu Smith show as far as the receivers on that team. Everybody else stinks. It's a low volume passing game, but A.J. Brown's a beast, and I think if you could add him as a wide receiver 3 or a flex, you would be served well to do so. All right, and then let's give you my final trade target of the week 5 trade market, the week 5 fantasy football trade market right here on the RosterWatch.com TradeCast. Before we get to some examples of some mock trades, we'll give you my last trade target of the week, and we've been giving you a few tight ends lately. I told you how it worked out for me with Mark Andrews last week. Well, maybe it can work out for you guys with Zach Ertz this week. 95% snap count in week 4. The production just absolutely has not been there for Zach Ertz. We know that Dallas Goedert's out. The matchups aren't necessarily beautiful moving forward, but look, the top 10 tight ends in standard formats currently are Robert Tonyan, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Janu Smith, Noah Fant, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee, Jimmy Graham, Mo Alley Cox, and Mike Gesicki. So certainly much different than we expected over the season. I think you could go as far as saying tight end has basically been, a mess, which is not totally surprising. So look, that's a headache I'd like to just put in the rearview mirror, just kind of set it and forget it. I think over the course of the season, the numbers will eventually be there. So maybe like I did for Mark Andrews this week, you guys go after Zach Ertz this week and, take a tight end, take another player, take a good tight end, take another player on your team that's a solid flex. Go to that Zach Ertz owner who's likely to be struggling and see if you can bring him home. I think that'd be a really nice ad that could make your starting lineup more competitive as we continue through the season. All right, so we always end with some examples of some mock trades that you guys can, consider as just a template for what to do in your own leagues. And we always are using the names of the players we discussed in this trade cast so that it's relevant and pertinent. But of course, there's other players in your league that you may have identified are trade targets, and for a variety of reasons, and we can't cover them here, all of them here every single week, but apply these same strategies, apply these same concepts to making those deals on those players in your league. So let's say, for instance, that we want to go after Ezekiel Elliott. We said we want to go after the biggest fish in all of fantasy in this episode, and none bigger than Zeke Elliott, especially in a high-flying offense. That Cowboys offense is just, they're going to be in a lot of games that force them to score a lot of points this year. So why not take Joe Mixon and DJ Chark, or Joe Mixon and Mark Ingram, or Melvin Gordon and Devontae Parker, and go to maybe a Zeke owner that's struggling in your league that needs 2 players in return and try to get something done. Like, that's the type of deal that you would want to try to do for Ezekiel Elliott. If you have a losing Ezekiel Elliott owner in your league, it would be malpractice. It would be negligent not to try to take Joe Mixon, Melvin Gordon, another maybe wide receiver 2, running back 2 type, package them up, and see if you can move in on Zeke Elliott this week in week 5. I think you could do something a little bit lesser but similar for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Or if you want to really turn it down a notch or two, I think you could do something for Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders. And when I look at that group, truthfully, I think Miles Sanders might be the best trade target, the best value of them all. The guy you give up the least for that has maybe the most, at least the best ratio of upside to what it's going to take to get him, the cost to get him. Miles Sanders really coming into focus for me on the Week 5 fantasy football trade market right here live on the program with you guys. We just talked about Zach Ertz. Can you take Noah Fant or Jonnu Smith or even Dalton Schultz, who's been doing great, throw in a Jerick McKinnon and get Zach Ertz? We talked about roster balancing trades, the 1-for-1 trade. So maybe you're deep at wide receiver, but you're struggling at tight end. Can you trade DJ Chark for Zach Ertz? Maybe you're a Tyler Higbee owner that's a little bit worried about the trends that we're seeing with that tight end situation. Take Tyler Higbee. Take an overperforming Mike Davis, whose value is going to be short-lived, but maybe really, really meaningful to somebody who can use him, this week or the next couple of weeks. Trade him for Zach Ertz. That's the way to get a good Zach Ertz deal done. We'll see if it works out, but in the end, none of this is guaranteed. You're going to hitch your wagon to the guys that we think are the best, and we're going to let the chips fall where they may, and we'll rest easy at night knowing that we have a guy like Zach Ertz in our tight end spot basically the rest of the way. We talked about Chris Godwin, so we love Miles Sanders as a target this week. Love Zach Ertz as a target this week. We need a tight end. And then at wide receiver, I think I love Chris Godwin as a target this week for winning teams that can spare a little bit more missed time here out of Godwin. If you can pick that dude up as a wide receiver 3 or a flex, he's going to change your entire season. You just watch. You'll be thanking me over at rosterwatch.com in probably a month from now. So I guess can you get an injured Chris Godwin who's not even going to play this week for a Ronald Jones and a Mark Ingram from his owner? Maybe his owner needs a running back and a flex play this week. Maybe those aren't the two exact guys, but something like that in order to pursue Chris Godwin is a recommended and a winning move for winning teams in fantasy. Folks, identify your needs. Target losing teams. Ask yourself, are you a team operating from a position of strength or luxury? Are you undefeated? Are you a one-loss team? Do you have a stockpile of quality assets? Always maintain a focus on your starting lineup when considering any deal. Ask yourself, is this rational? Is this logical? This is like a puzzle, guys. Does it make sense for your team? Have you identified your needs? Are you buying or are you buying low? Are you selling? Are you selling high? Are you selling low? Look at it you're trying to optimize your roster. Again, it's like a puzzle. Is this the highest and best trade I can make or use of my assets right now? What's the net fallout from this deal I'm considering? Where am I noticeably upgrading my roster, especially my starting lineup? What a meaningful value am I giving away in this deal? Try to distill this guy all down, guys. You got to try to get to the bottom line in life. If you can quickly get to the bottom line and get kind of net this whole thing out, what does it really mean? You'll be well served on your fantasy football trade market. You'll be well served in life. Who does it send to your bench? Does this trade upgrade your starting lineup? Are the guys you trading for starters? Are they going to be starters on your team? Who are the principals involved in the deal you're looking at? Are you getting the best player in this deal? Are you a losing team that needs to liquidate? Do you even need to get multiple players in return? What are the upcoming schedules for the players involved in the trade deals you're looking at? Again, make meaningful trades, RosterWatch Nation. Craft deals that are enticing to the other party. Take the time to do it. It'll increase your success rate. You'll get more deals done like that, and you don't worry about trying to get one over on somebody so much. Just, follow what we've laid out here. Value these players. Be vigilant. Be opportunistic. And make deals that are appealing and enticing to the other party so you can actually get something done. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, quit overpaying for quarterbacks. Please, everybody, subscribe, listen, rate, review, follow us on YouTube, the RosterWatch channel on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at RosterWatch. Of course, check us out on the site at rosterwatch.com. And of course, We always have to thank each and every one of you for your undying and loyal support over 10 years at rosterwatch.com now. None of this would be possible without you. It's my pleasure to serve on the front lines for all of your fantasy football teams. And guys, we have much, much more in store for the rest of the season. Just keep grinding, keep working this trade market, keep liberating these waiver wire spots, and we're going to take our teams right to the top. Until next time, happy trading, everybody, and so long, RosterWatch Nation.